important the status of our water and how important it is to the quality of life. I'd like to acknowledge and start the process by thanking our councilmen and women who are present, the citizens who are here this evening, and we hope to have a very robust conversation. This is not just a report, but a status update, as well as inviting you into a conversation with this committee. At this particular time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Cohen to present our process, our findings, and suggestions.
Thank you very much, Fred. I'm Jared Cohen. It's my pleasure to welcome you here also. I want, first of all, to introduce and make sure you know who the members of the Blue Ribbon panel are. I have to say, though, first that it only occurred to me today to look up what a Blue Ribbon panel is. All of us have served on commissions and committees and other kinds of panels. I've never been on a Blue Ribbon panel. And I was curious as to why we were called that. And I looked it up, and it says a selected or special panel. And I guess that's what we are. I don't know if we're qualified that way, but what we are community members who care about our community and about PWSA and about water, who brought to this task expertise in environment, in water utilities, in finance, in law, in community relations. It's an outstanding group, and it's been my pleasure and honor to work with them. You've already met Fred Brown on your right. Michelle, who's president of the Women for a Healthy Environment. Mark Stolga, to my right, your left, vice president of West Banco, and Alex Thompson from Houston Harbor. I want to emphasize something that our report makes clear, which is this panel is independent. We're not city employees, we're not PWSA employees, we're not paid to do this. We're doing it for just the reasons I said, because we're community members like you who care about water and PWSA. Let's just set the stage and be clear on what brings us here, though none of us will be surprised by this. Issues with regard to lead in the water, our decaying infrastructure in our water supply and treatment system, multiple boil advisories, outdated billing procedures, and there's a litany of things that have occurred over many years involving PWSA. It's been well documented in the media. This is just a sampling going back some years. I think it's also something that we have to acknowledge that PWSA, if it doesn't work, and if we have a real disaster, it would represent, we think, probably the leading risk to the further economic development of this region. So it's something that just must be fixed. Recognizing that, the city, the mayor, appointed the Blue Ribbon panel, this panel, in March. Now we basically had two tasks. One, to advise the city on who it should hire as a consultant to study restructuring options for PWSA. That was task one. And task two then was to weigh in on the recommendations from that consultant and provide our own recommendations or endorse what the consultant provided. This all started in March, as I said. The selection process resulted in IMG, Infrastructure Management Group, being chosen as the restructuring consultant. They started their work in April. They worked over the next 6 or 7 months and issued their final report, what they call their Task 5 report, at the end of November. Now, the Blue Ribbon panel did not participate in IMG's work. We watched in the same way you did. We had public briefings in this room, and many of you came to those briefings to get updates. But we didn't advise or participate or contribute to IMG's work. Like everybody else, we received their report at the end of November, and then over the next month, we dug into that report. We also tapped many other sources of information. PWSA was very generous and helpful in giving us all the information we wanted, and even more than that. They were happy to inundate us with information. They had a lot of data. We got input from you at our public meetings. We listened to and heard from our water campaign. There was a group headed by a man named Howard Newkrug, the former director of the Philadelphia Water Department, which did an independent assessment of PWSA, and they issued a report. We found that quite useful. We studied carefully the audits of PWSA that were performed by the city controller and the state auditor general and EPA and DEP. And all of this was input to the deliberations of the Blue Ribbon panel, which issued its report on December 28th. So the Blue Ribbon, the IMG report, as I said, came out November 27th. We issued our report December 28th. Our report is available online. I don't think we have hard copies in the room, but if you want a hard copy, let us know. We'd be happy to get it for you. Tonight, we want to tell you about our key findings and recommendations, and we want to hear from you. We don't intend this to be either a monologue or a passive public hearing. We want this to be a dialogue, and I'm going to briefly go over our findings and recommendations, and then we look forward to hearing from you. A very important key finding, and one that we think has not gotten the kind of media attention it deserves, which is that PWSA has in fact made very significant progress over the last several months. We concluded that based on our own observations, based on the independent assessment done by Howard Newkrug and colleagues. This is good news, and it's a tribute to the current management and the current board of PWSA and all the hardworking people at PWSA, and we're grateful for that. I want to acknowledge that Bob Weimar, the executive director, is with us tonight, as is Deb Listichian, the chair of the board. Thank you both for being here and your colleagues, and congratulations on the progress you've made. But, and there's a big but, even they would agree there's a long way to go. And furthermore, we believe, the Blue Ribbon panel, very strongly, that to solidify these gains and to make further progress, some very important changes need to be made in the governance of PWSA and in several of their operational practices and procedures. Here are our recommendations in three categories: governance, operations, infrastructure. Starting with governance. I'm stuck, sorry. Yeah, so that's what I said already. I'm sorry. Let me pause here. So I asserted these improvements in PWSA and cited Howard Newkrug and Associates also. But it pays to be specific here, and this is just a sampling of highlights of PWSA's progress over the last several months. Of course, there's the lead service line replacement program. That's going to be a long-term fix, as you know. The customer assistance program. Particularly significant is the strategic plan, and particularly their capital improvement program. This is the core risk-based plan for replacing and repairing the infrastructure, which of course is the backbone of the water system. We are pleased to see this plan and the steps that have been taken to put it into place, and other improvements as well. So it's not just hand-waving. There are some real things that have happened. Okay, let me move now to the recommendations, starting with governance. And for us, we consider these to be the most important recommendations because everything we think flows from governance. Get the governance right for the long term, and we believe PWSA will continue to improve and become the kind of authority that we all want it and need it to be. First of all, we recommend that PWSA be retained as a municipal authority, i.e. a public entity, not be privatized. But instead of the board being appointed by the mayor, which is the case now under the Municipal Authorities Act, we believe that that responsibility should be taken over by a new 5-member board of nominators, as we call it. 5 upstanding citizens of Pittsburgh, people whose names you're likely to recognize. We don't have the names yet. I'm just characterizing them. People known for their competence, their experience, and their community engagement and commitment. This board of nominators would be initially appointed by the mayor from a slate nominated or put forward by the Blue Ribbon panel. After that point, though, the board of nominators would be what we call self-perpetuating, meaning they would appoint their successors. In other words, the mayor would no longer have a role in appointing that board. That board of nominators would be the group that identifies and appoints the board of directors instead of the mayor doing that. The board of directors, we recommend, be composed of 9 people who live or work. We meant to add in this those who also work in the PWSA service area. People chosen to be representative of our community and also who bring relevant expertise to the job. People with financial backgrounds, legal backgrounds, engineering, etc. All of the things that are relevant to the operation of a high-performing water provider. The Board of Nominators would also oversee the Board of Directors in the sense of checking on their performance on an annual basis. We think that these changes, which would effectively take the elective politics out of the governance of PWSA, are very important. The second category of recommendations deal with the operations of PWSA. There are 7 things that we focused on, which are long-standing practices, which we think need to be changed. I'm not going to detail these. Some of them are well known to you. For example, something that gets a lot of attention is the free water that the city enjoys. Well, of course, that's revenue that PWSA does not get, and it provides also the wrong incentives for those who are using the water for free, and other things as well. These represent barriers, constraints, or a burden on PWSA and their ability to be effective. We understand that changing these would not be easy, and we treat them in a separate category from the governance changes, which we think are preeminently important. The third category deals with infrastructure. I already mentioned the capital improvement program that PWSA has developed. We encourage PWSA to continue after that program, continue to refresh it to make sure that it reflects the priorities that are based on the risks inherent in the operations of the system. We're confident they will do that. We also think, though, that that PWSA should have every tool available in being efficient in fixing its infrastructure. One of those tools that they are denied now because of the vagaries of state law is something called design build, which has been found to be a faster, more efficient, more effective way to build things, and PWSA is not able to do that. We think they should be allowed to do it. How are we going to implement these changes? Well, as you know, I believe, the mayor issued an executive order last Monday, a week ago yesterday, which instructed us, the Blue Ribbon Panel, to engage an independent restructuring counsel. This is a local attorney who will be working with the Blue Ribbon Panel to develop a contract between the city and PWSA to implement these governance changes I talked about. We intend also that that contract be in place by March 31st so that we can proceed to make the governance changes that we've recommended. In addition, and in parallel to the writing of that contract, the Independent Restructuring Council will develop appropriate amendments to state law and city ordinances as appropriate to make these changes permanent. The contract is significant, but we need amendments to state law, in particular the Municipal Authorities Act, to make these changes permanent. That's our story. We encourage you to stay in touch with us beyond tonight. You can submit written comments to us, questions, through the website shown on the screen. You can also stay in touch with the things that we're doing. Sorry, we have a new website.
Well, no, that's the email too. Website and email.
Oh, the website's correct. Yes?
Correct.
And we have an email. No one's going to remember this. It's not hard to remember, though. It's PWSA Blue Ribbon 2018 at gmail.com. PWSA Blue Ribbon 2018. Rolls right off the tongue. Thank you very much for your attention and for being here tonight. We're looking forward to hearing your comments, your questions, and responding to them. And Fred Brown will take over the moderation from this point on.
Yes. Ms. Cashman, you want to come up? And so we would ask people to keep their comments to 2 minutes. We want to make this an exchange, so please feel free and honored to speak your mind. This should be dialogue between us and you as well.
Good
Please,
evening.
and please introduce yourself as well.
My name is Stephanie Pashman, and I'm the CEO of the Allegheny Conference on Community Development, a nonprofit civic leadership organization focused on improving the economy and quality of life in the 10-county region. For almost 75 years, the conference has been bringing together Pittsburgh public and private sector leadership to address some of our region's challenges. In fact, the organization was founded in 1944 to coordinate efforts to improve Pittsburgh's air and water quality. We are all here this evening to learn more about the future of the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority and the restructuring and improvement recommendations that have been issued by Mayor Peduto's esteemed Blue Ribbon panel. I would first like to thank Mayor Peduto for the leadership he has shown in working to tackle the serious issues faced by the PWSA head-on. And I would also like to thank Dr. Jerry Cohen, who time and again has stepped up to provide the necessary leadership required to address major challenges facing our region. His service in leading the Blue Ribbon panel has been invaluable. There's a formula for success in this panel, an independent group of experts that work collaboratively and incorporated community input in developing recommendations for how to fix the PWSA. It's a formula that should guide us as we move forward in this process. The stakes are high. The PWSA, as it is currently structured, creates significant public health issues in the region and threatens our residents, our businesses, and the enormous economic, environmental, and quality of life progress we have all made in recent decades. The safety of our drinking water, the strength of our economy, and our quality of life all depend on swift action. Experts agree that the PWSA failed on its core mission to reliably deliver safe drinking water to residents. And while we're already paying the price for this failure, things could get a lot worse. One point I would like to make is that these issues have been building for many decades. No single person, no single administration is to blame for the situation we find ourselves in today. But the focus now must be on moving forward. We are very encouraged by the executive order issued by Mayor Peduto adopting the restructuring recommendations of the panel that call for independent governance of PWSA protected from political influence. Regulators and industry experts agree that this is critical to ensuring that the challenges facing the agency can be addressed in the transformational manner required. I appreciate the mayor's action on this issue and continue to stand with him and all relevant parties to advance without delay the panel's recommendations. Moving forward, the most relevant question at hand is what structure is necessary to ensure the safe drinking water is delivered in a reliable manner to all residents, regardless of circumstance or neighborhood, and how we can, as public and private sector leaders of our region, reach that objective in the shortest period of time. This question will be answered by the Board of Nominators and Directors of the PWSA. The Allegheny Conference is committed to staying engaged through the process to ensure that this objective is met. What I will say is that it is vital for the Board of Nominators to comprise individuals who are apolitical, independent of elective politics, as this panel has said, reflective of the PWSA service area in all respects, represent the community in an inclusive way, and take an open-minded approach to exploring solutions to achieve the panel's goal of, quote, fundamental change in governance and, quote, continued transformation of the organization needed for the sustainable and long-term success of the PWSA. I will close by saying that while the Pittsburgh region has greatly improved its image over the past several decades, it's always a good reminder that this progress was not a foregone conclusion. It was largely the concerted collaboration between the region's public, private, foundation, and university communities and the leadership of citizens across the region that brought us through some huge environmental and economic challenges to the place we are today. These issues facing the PWSA, while significant, are not unsolvable. We have overcome bigger challenges. I'm encouraged to see the level of community engagement present in this room tonight, and I look forward to working together to see the PWSA become the kind of utility that's an asset to the region and its future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pashman. Our next speaker is, and I apologize if I can't read this. Can you tell us that, Michael?
Michael, Pastor.
Michael from the Sierra Club, is that correct? Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mike Pastorkovich. I'm the chair of the Sierra Club Allegheny Group, which is the local Sierra Club, which is the oldest and largest environmental organization in the United States. And my concerns are basically, I understand how politics works. It's sometimes works anyway. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. I'll put you on this board if you can bring in a certain number of votes for me. Let's kick the can down the road. Those are the flaws of an elective political system. On the bright side, or on the good side, is that elective politics is the only voice that we the people have when it comes to the PWSA. It's the only direct voice that we the people have to help to form the policies of the PWSA. We are the people, and our families are the ones who drink the water, we bathe in the water, we clean with the water, and in times past, perhaps people haven't paid as much attention to the water issues as they should have, but with the lead in the water and the boil alerts and such, more and more people are paying attention. And when we get to elect the mayor, who at this point appoints the board, then it could become a primary elective issue, a campaign issue. And if this is taken away, this board of nominators, this self-perpetuating board of nominators really takes our voice away in influencing the policy of the PWSA. So I really don't see how the Sierra Club could support a solution that takes the voice of the people away in the realm of elective politics. Thank you.
Thank you.
The goal here is to have a discussion, not to do a city council meeting where, people talk and we sit here like logs and then we walk away. So, Mike, I'd respond to your concern in that was something that the Blue Ribbon panel talked a lot about. And the concern is creating sort of this star chamber of a board of nominators and a board that's not responsive to the community concerns. And I think that was one of the reasons why we created a larger board, a 9-member board, and we also created a board that we expect the board of nominators will make diverse and reflective of the community. And so as opposed to going to your city council person who, depending on what city council person is in or not in favor of the, with the mayor, may have influence at PWSA or may not have influence at PWSA, you can go directly to a PWSA board member and express your concerns. So we don't view the separation from political influence as separating PWSA from responsiveness to the community. In fact, the opposite. We think separating it from political influence will prevent whoever is in power from having influence over PWSA. And one of the challenges associated with having whoever is in power associated with running PWSA is that the durability of change. The effort that we have to make is not a 1-year effort. It's not a 2-year effort. 10-year effort, Bob? hopefully 10-year effort. After 10 years, we can be proud. And so administrations and political leaders change, but we need to have a focus, consistent, durable focus. If in 10 years we want our water system to be something that we're all proud of for our kids and our grandkids. So we evaluated that concern, and it's a legitimate concern, and attempted in our recommendations to deal with it.
I guess I want to amplify the conduits are still there. We're not changing government. You'll still be able to get access to your councilman or access to the mayor, and there'll be more pathways for feedback. You mentioned patronage, and I'll scratch my back, you'll scratch yours. We've all been around the block, but I think hopefully we're getting to a place in our society where that doesn't happen anymore. And, I can't point to specific things, at the PWSA, but, we'd all have to scratch our heads and say if maybe some of the old ways we dealt with our system contributed to, not having a world-class system, the most efficacious quality of water. And we'll talk about some more detailed aspects in the future, but this is about, moving forward in really all ways we're going to interface with the community.
Thank you. I would ask for Casey Medina's from Plan. Please state your name again, make sure I got it correct.
My name is Casey Mednes, and I'm from Pittsburgh Lead Action Now Plan. It's a community group comprised of citizens that's working on Pittsburgh's lead issue, namely the water. First, I want to say thank you to the panel members and the elected officials here, as well as my fellow community members. I appreciate the very detailed and thoughtful work that has been the result of this panel. I hope in the discussions of restructuring and the fact that we're potentially under PUC oversight, that we're not losing sight of the fact that the lead pipes need to be replaced. Nobody should be drinking the tap water in Pittsburgh. I do feel like it really is time to sound the alarm. Lead has been a topic of conversation for the past year, and that's good, but we're still not at safe drinking water levels, and the levels have risen. I want to know, has the panel looked at places like Lansing, Michigan, or Madison, Wisconsin, cities of similar size that have replaced their lead pipes and have greatly reduced the lead levels in their water? Because they were able to fund it, and I was hoping we could look to them for best practices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Casey, and we appreciate your comments. And so, as you may know and have heard, I am Executive Director of Women for a Healthy Environment. So putting that hat back on here, it's certainly an issue that, as the Blue Ribbon panel, we've discussed and is certainly a concern and priority. So as you know, Lansing and Madison replaced their lead service lines over a 12-year period. And I think there's an opportunity here, and a significant opportunity to, Pittsburgh always is, an opportunity to have innovation here and to be on the cutting edge. And we have aging infrastructure all across the United States. And so this is something that Pittsburgh is not alone in, but we know that significant lead levels are of concern here, and our December round of testing shows us that. I think that we can do better. And the Blue Ribbon panel has certainly, that's been in the forefront of our thinking of how can we, as a community, look at that vision so that it doesn't take 12 years like Lansing and Madison, but maybe it takes 10 years. We know it's not going to happen in 1 or 2, but there's a significant investment that needs to happen. And the capital improvement projects that PWSA has shared with us certainly is getting to that point. I think it's an opportunity to bring forth to the Board of Nominators and Directors a challenge, so to speak, that we want to see this happen within a finite time period so that it's something that we aren't looking at as an overhaul in a 20 or 30-year period, because we know that the exposure is happening now. We need to protect the citizens of this region now. So this is certainly something that is of concern to the Blue Ribbon panel and that we've been taking quite quite seriously in our deliberations in terms of what the recommendations are that we're putting forward.
Could I ask, Casey, did Lansing or Madison or any place else come up with any kind of innovative financing mechanisms for this? Could you go to the mic? Okay, yeah, they won't pick it up otherwise.
Not that I know of. I actually don't know the specific way that they funded it. But I was wondering with Pittsburgh and we have so many corporations here and we have such a large philanthropic community. I wonder if there's any discussion, if there's been any integration. Not that corporations should be funding our infrastructure, but I mean, they are part of the Pittsburgh community.
Well, and I think that, so what we're understanding is that there perhaps might be some significant investment at the federal level in terms of infrastructure, and so perhaps that's an opportunity to tap into some of the funding that might be available. We don't know that yet, and we might know that in a few hours, but there is that call in terms of infrastructure at the federal level. But we also are trying to, and when I say we now, the organization is having a lead summit in May, and we are trying to reach out to the folks who have been integral to that process of the overhaul of the lead service line in Lansing and Madison to bring one of them here so that we can learn from that process and hear from the people who are making the change happen in their community. So it's our intention to have somebody from Madison or Lansing here on May 10th.
Okay, thank you.
We may just ask if I can put you on the spot or you, Deb, on the spot. PWSA is here, so if you can give us a quick, Bob, minute and a half response in terms of what specifically you're doing. I know you allocated a substantial sum to replacing both private and public portions of the water service lines,
Right.
but.
Well, as most of you know, we are operating under a consent order, and that consent order requires us to achieve certain goals within certain timeframes. The first and foremost goal is the ability to chemically eliminate the corrosion problem that is causing the lead issue for us in our service lines. We have submitted reports to DEP, and we expect that within a hopefully short few weeks, we will get the, if you will, proverbial nod to proceed with the implementation. The chemicals that we're looking at are used around the country. They've been used in a number of major cities. They're not at all toxic in any way. And so we're confident that they can provide the stability in terms of water quality while we perform the next phase, which is the replacement of the service lines. We have this year set aside $44 million for the purpose of doing the first 2,100 lines. For those who may not be aware, we will be doing the full line based on the agreement and the approval by the legislature to allow us to work on private property. These first 2,100 lines are required by our consent order to be done by the end of this year, 2018, and we're in the process now of receiving bids for the work, and we expect to start in earnest in March. At the same time, we're completing the evaluation of all the service lines to determine where the lead is. We have a 3-year program that has been approved by the state. We have authorized a contract for the lead service line assessment. And that work will continue continuously for the next 2.5 to 3 years, at the completion of which we'll know the condition of every line in our system as required by EPA and DEP. Beyond that, we are also being asked to, in the subsequent time period by 2022, to provide a complete inventory of all service lines, not only those residential, but all of the commercial, all of the educational, all of the hospital lines in our system. And those are all projects that are underway. They've all been budgeted as part of our 5-year capital plan, and we're confident that we can get those activities done. It's clear that the long-term cost is over $500 million, and exactly how we're going to afford the costs, and given the other responsibilities we have in the short term, is going to be a challenge. And hence the reason that I think Michelle mentioned the idea of getting funding from federal sources. And certainly we look forward to hopefully the federal government coming up with that large capital program that they're proposing and making monies available to us. Certainly we're going to and have been discussing these works with the foundations and others. We have also set up with the agreement of the state, a $1.8 million program to support the cost of replacing lead service lines for those less fortunate. So I think we've got a program that's well oiled, so to speak, and I'll come back to you a year from now, hopefully tell you how much we've gotten done.
Thank you. Steve from Pittsburgh DSA. Can you state your name, full name, please?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Marziel from Pittsburgh Democratic Socialists of America. I have to apologize because I haven't had any time today to prepare my thoughts, but I just wanted to start off by clarifying something someone said earlier, that PWSA is holding back the economic development of the city. And I just want to clarify that economic development shouldn't be at the forefront of our minds. It should be public health, right? It should be like, we all need water to survive. So people's health should be first and foremost. And because we all drink water, we all need it to survive, we all deserve a say in how it's managed and how it's supplied to us. And I look at this proposal and I'm frankly baffled by how my voice is heard. The key to fixing a struggling democracy is not by scrapping it, right? There are improvements that we can make to make it more transparent and more accountable, but we don't just throw it out the window. And when you say that this panel is going to be apolitical, that it's going to be independent, I find that incredibly naive. Nobody is apolitical. But the thing is, like, if a politician is corrupt, we can elect them out of office. I don't see how, if this panel of nominators, this board of nominators is not following what we want as the public, like, how do we hold them accountable? How do we get a new board of nominators? I don't get that. So I guess that's my main point. Secondly, I'm just overall kind of disappointed in the lack of public engagement in this whole process. I can count on my hand the number of ways you've engaged the public. Like, you've had a website with a 100-word comment box. Okay, great. You had one public workshop, which was a week before IMG's presentation. So I'm sure they really took in our opinions and, developed them into their report. I'm just, I don't know, kind of confused by it all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Fred, could I just make one point that I don't think has been made clear. Putting aside the independence or not, or the lack of elective politics in the board creation process, the one particular virtue of what we're recommending is you have a board that only has one responsibility, PWSA. The board now, by definition, by structure, because of the way it's set up, has split loyalties. It's made up of people who work for the city or who are appointed by the mayor, who could fire them at will. So there's a long list of operating practices that have evolved over the years, which are great for the city's finances, but not necessarily good for PWSA. Now, whether that's a manifestation of the governance issue or not, I think it is. The key thing is we don't have a board that has the luxury of focusing on just PWSA, and their number one goal, which you're absolutely right, is public health and providing safe, drinkable water. The virtue of our plan is you would have such a board, and we don't have it now, and won't, so long as we have the current governance structure.
And we did look at other cities. You were asking the question earlier, and this model is based on Indianapolis. and they have a well-run system specifically because they took politics out of it. I mean, politics is the reason that we are in the place. Yep, I'll let you respond. What's that?
Sorry, there was like a municipality I read in the news that they're in like an $11 million lawsuit or something.
Not
breaking a
Indianapolis.
contract.
Indianapolis is the public trust model that was
Right, but
thrown out by IMG that we
Citizens
didn't
is in the
follow.
lawsuit. If I can't remember the name of the town, but
Yeah.
you might want to look it up.
Yep. So, but the point is this: one of the reasons that we are in the problem, the crisis situation we are now with respect to public health, is politics. The Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority has not invested in the system for 20 years. And why is that? Because the politicians didn't want to raise the rates. That's the principal reason we are where we are today. They did not want to go back to their constituents and say, look, yeah, we have to raise the rates. We have to invest in the system. I know there's a desire for people to believe that water should be an inalienable right and should be free. It's just not possible. It's just not possible to have the infrastructure that we have to have in this city to produce water and to distribute water and not pay for it. And so that's the independence that we want to give to the authority so the board can be laser focused on running a utility, not getting reelected, not transferring a contract to a supporter of a mayor in the past. Those type of things are the type of things that we're trying to drive through this independence model.
Maybe just as a side, just to let you guys know that us as a group, we're just kind of temporary too. We're not going to be around, much longer. Hopefully we'll have longevity in our personal lives, but we're just a temporary group that's, just trying to facilitate some changes that really were the need for them were established at the top, of our city. So our purpose is to make an evaluation, make some recommendations, see it through, and then, our work is done. And hopefully it will be passed on to groups of concerned citizens and business leaders and community leaders that can give us the highest quality water. That has always been at the top of our list. And I can assure you, to get the highest quality water, you have to have expertise. That's how it's going to be achieved.
One of the other things, just to clarify in terms of our engagement with all of you, is to give you a little bit of a better understanding of how that process worked. And so we were really charged with analyzing and assessing the report provided by IMG and all of their processes in terms of their interim reports to date. And so we, just like all of you, were sitting here and listening to the IMG presentations and learning from that experience. And they had hosted the public session on the south side, of which several of us had attended as well. So this is truly our first opportunity to engage with all of you in a different way through this process. In fact, the website, we were able just to get up and get this. Our report will be available on the website, as Jerry mentioned earlier, and we now have an email that goes directly to us so that we can be responsive and hear from all of you in terms of what these concerns are moving forward. So this has been an iterative process in terms of the engagement and how we've been able to connect with each of you. So I appreciate your comments, but also wanted you to know that, we, just like all of you, have been watching and listening and reaching out and deliberating in terms of the information that's been shared by all the different stakeholders.
And I would add that you're looking at a group of people who had many conversations behind the scenes about how to make sure the community's voice was heard, including how we looked at potential members being selected to the committees and such. That has not fallen death on our process. But I think to the team's, comments, our goal was really to assess the report and come back and give recommendations. How and why there was or wasn't more community input is something we should take in as a concern moving forward and look at how that can be improved. But our report is basically a synopsis of IMG's work and the recommendations to move forward at the city level.
You want to comment? You look like you want to comment, so comment.
I mean, like, it's 2018, guys. Like, you're saying you want to restructure all of PWSA by March 31st, and you're just starting to get in touch with the public now? Like, you should have been having workshops all across the city. You know, not just one, you know, if somebody can't make that one, what are they supposed to do? You know, you should have been engaging the public all year last year. And to say that, you know, people are calling for like permanent change to PWSA, and you want to make that decision in, what, 2 months? It's just confusing.
Thank you. Adam from Clean Water Action. Can you state your name, full name, please?
Yeah, hi. My name is Adam Tusnick. I'm an organizer with Clean Water Action, and we work in coalition with the Our Water campaign because we do believe that access to safe and affordable drinking water is a fundamental human right, and that the best way to achieve and maintain those rights is through a publicly owned and democratically controlled water authority. So I've read the report on a few times, and first just wanted to thank you all for all the hard work that you've put into analyzing and understanding the true nature of and scope of our water crisis here, and for putting forth thoughtful and informed recommendations, which our coalition, you know, broadly supports. You also mentioned that PWSA had made some tremendous progress in the last year, and recognized that they were headed in the right direction. While we definitely have to recognize the great progress made by the folks at PWSA, we also have to recognize the efforts of all the community members here who have been taking time out of their day to make their voices heard. I don't think the shakeup would have happened unless people showed up at PWSA community meetings and the ones hosted by IMG and by you guys, and showed up at the PWSA board meetings. People have been sharing their concerns with letter to the editor, over social media, conversations with their neighbors, and they called their legislators and their council people and the mayor. And with that pressure, our government was forced to act. This is democracy. Since Pittsburghers started to become vocal about this, we've seen progress. And you listed a lot of the progress that we had up there: the customer assistance program, the ending of the partial line replacements, the moratorium, the PWSA business plan, the roadmap for success that's going to generate enough capital to complete all these public and private things. We even got city council to pass ordinances. We got our state legislature to work together to unanimously pass 2 bills, which is crazy. But none of this would have happened if citizens were denied their seat at the table, which is why we're insisting that no matter what the governance changes happen in the future, that not only folks do have their seat at the table, but all these changes actually increase democracy and increase transparency and increase accountability. Because we know that that's what works, and that's what's been proven to work over the past year. So I really appreciate your suggestions for how the city and PWSA can make those operational changes to raise money to expedite the full lead line replacement. We especially like that you're behind the implementation of a stormwater equity fee. And thanks for making such a strong recommendation against any form of privatization of our water authority. We hope that you're able to do everything in your power to make sure that all these recommendations are swiftly implemented.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Dr. Vincent Cole from Penn.
Good evening. I'm the Reverend Dr. Vincent Kolb, the pastor of 6th Presbyterian Church, chairperson of the Ratepayer Justice Task Force of the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network. We also work in coalition with the Our Water campaign, And the Our Water campaign has fought with others and won a commitment from PWSA to replace full lead service lines so that thousands of residents will soon have access to clean, safe drinking water, and we are looking forward to that day. We have fought with our other coalition partners and won the Customer Assistance Program that will keep drinking water affordable for our low-income residents and working families in the city, which will be absolutely critical as we look at the increase in rates. None of this would have been possible without our working relationship with the board of PWSA and without public democratic control over our drinking water. We applaud your recommendation for PWSA to remain a public asset. We want to work with you to make sure that we preserve democracy and public accountability so that water can continue to be the gift that God intended for all of God's people. I would agree that it's expensive to maintain and build infrastructure in order for water to be accessible to us all. But with climate change, our water will become even more valuable, and therefore, inherently, it will become even more political. Water does not belong to any one of us, as expensive as the infrastructure is to make it happen, and it should never be commodified so only a privileged few enjoy the profit of an infrastructure that is built. Water's a gift. It's a gift given to all of God's children and all of the creation. It's our water together. It's our money, and the public should always have a say in how it is controlled now and in the future. It was John Muir who once said that nothing dollarable is safe, however guarded. So let's continue to guard the gift of water by keeping it public. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. And, we look maybe like we're suited up people and, we're kind of prim and proper, but, a lot of our, private meetings, we're, in our tennis shoes or in our casual clothes and, we're going toe to toe over a lot of issues. That kind of community advocacy was really important to us. It really was. And a well-run utility allows us to take care of people that have need. And that's what we should all be doing. And unless we get to a well-run utility, we won't be able to help the people that have need. And I think you folks need to know that was one of our priorities as well. So thank you for your work in your community and thank you for your comments.
And I would like to say that I think the heartfelt feeling of this Blue Ribbon panel is that we tried to ensure the voices were heard, and we're not perfect. But I think listening today, we hear over and over again the need to make sure the public's voice is part of this process, which we can convey as well in the next phase of our work again. But I think we all as citizens have a role too to confront the injustices within the system. And ultimately, we can sit here and talk about a problem that's 20 years old, and we need to be realistic that this is not going to get resolved in 1 year or one system's response. This is a long-term fix. So creating a healthy relationship that deals with difficult issues requires trust. It requires consistency and transparency. And so if you read the report, those are the things that we highlighted that were critical in the governance process. And so that will be a paradigm shift from past practices to suggested current practices. And the role that the community plays looms heavily in our minds. How we get to that point is still a process. This is an iterative process. This is not ironclad. We didn't come up with a complete process. It's done and sealed. It's really something that we have to continue to work through. So I just wanted to state that this is ongoing. Ali Shaw.
Hi. My name is Ali Shaw. I'm the environmental justice organizer with Pittsburgh United, and I'm the organizer of the Our Water campaign. So I would like to start, sorry if I'm repetitive, but I'd like to start by saying thank you for the work you put into this report. for taking the time to really listen to the current leaders at PWSA, for seeking input from the Mayor's Innovation Project, and for being willing to listen to us, our campaign. But most of all, thank you for listening to the concerns of Pittsburgh residents from the last community meeting that IMG held, and recommending that PWSA remain in the hands of the public. That's a huge win for our region. As Vince said, water is going to become more and more valuable over the next several decades, and we need to make sure that money stays within the public's hands. But our campaign would also like to address the idea of governance that you brought up in your report. So we understand more than anyone probably the frustrations that you've had with the current board and political influence over PWSA. But I'd like to clarify something. When you say that you want to remove politics, this isn't actually what you're saying, I think. You can't remove politics from a power structure. The definition of politics is a struggle for power. So by putting these 5 nominators in this powerful position, you are just transferring political power from the mayor to them, and this board of nominators will therefore become political. What you're effectively doing is removing elected officials from PWSA and removing democracy from PWSA. So the Our Water campaign believes that even if you want to insulate the authority from daily politics, democracy and accountability to the public is a critical part of any strong public agency. So the problem with the Board of Nominators is that there's no check on their power and no structure that keeps them accountable to the people of Pittsburgh. So before you create any new structure of governance, we must have a conversation from the public and with you all around how these structures are going to be held accountable to us. I have a list that I'll share with you all, but our campaign worked with several of our partners to come up with a couple ideas that we have around creating that structure of accountability. So the first, we agree that there should be areas of expertise on the board. The ones we would like to put forth in addition to yours are the green infrastructure expert, a representative for low-income ratepayers, a labor representative, and a public health expert. We agree that there should be no paid mayoral staff on the board of directors. We believe there should be an open and transparent process by which interested and qualified people can apply to be on the PWSA board, as happens in many other cities. There should be a public interview process for the board of directors, and we believe that the Pittsburgh City Council should be able to recall members of the board and nominators by a supermajority vote, which would be 7 out of 9. So I've printed out copies of our recommendations, but this is just the beginning of a conversation. We're still figuring out where we stand on all of these, so we want to continue talking with you all about these ideas. And I just wanted to respond because I know we've already talked about Steve's comments. But yes, we can still go to someone on the board of nominators and request a meeting, and we do that all the time as we advocate for things. But if they deny us, then what do we do? Like, who do we go to hold them accountable to say, you're a public official, you need to meet with us? Like, normally we would go to the person that appointed them and request that they put some pressure on them to meet with us. But if they're not accountable to anyone, then that's the highest up in the chain we can go. So that's what we're asking to inject back into the structure, is some democracy and a way to hold them accountable.
Thank you.
Allie, I wanted to thank you and the Our Waters campaign for sharing some specific recommendations, because that's the intent of tonight, is we want to hear from all of you, and if you have specific thoughts and recommendations, this process is still evolving. And we are still working in terms of the content of the contract and what that looks like. So this is helpful for us, and this is what we want to, this is our purpose to be here tonight, to hear from all of you, to get recommendations such as this, to really, we recognize that there could be new thinking from the community and new suggestions that hadn't been brought forth or thought about amongst ourselves. So, that's what we're hoping to garner from tonight. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you. And I think I speak for all of us. We really appreciate a solution-oriented approach. I mean, we can have dialogue about what's broke, but we need ideas to come up with that we can extrapolate and look at what the best practices are moving forward. So hats off to your team and your group, and we look forward at some level to have some additional dialogue with you guys.
And can you just repeat the website that you all operate and the email address?
Yeah, what's that? You must have it memorized by now.
So the email's new. So to be transparent, IMG and their consultants and team had developed that website that you all received, where the postings were for all of IMG's reports. So we don't have control over that, but we're working with them to post our information to it. We don't want to create a new website. It doesn't make sense. People are used to going to that website, and I think all the collection of information, we don't want that to be gone. So we'll continue to get information posted to that. The difference is the email that's been created so that it goes directly to our team. So that's the PWSA Blue Ribbon 2018 at gmail.com. And so that's the best communication channel, as well as reaching out to each of us independently for sure too. You know, we're happy to provide all of our contact information.
That email
for
address
that.
will be posted on that website, on the email address will be posted.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Les from Squirrel Hills.
My name is Les Ludwig. I live at 6589 Rosemore Street since 1963, and somehow I survived whatever was in the water. Now, there is a choice. We just heard that there isn't a choice, that you get up against a certain level of structure that we've discussed here this evening, and that then what do we do? Well, I represent that choice as a food technologist with a degree and a start of an advanced degree at MIT. And you'll say, well, Les, what the heck are you doing? What did you do that says that you are a choice? I didn't trust the city water as early as 3 or 4 years ago. And so I looked at what is the system that takes everything out of the water, not just lead. I just called and checked, and the system takes radiation, which was covered in a recent Post-Gazette article. In other words, it takes all of it out, and the percentage of error is over 90-something, 95% by one of the national water associations that makes the standards for water in this country. So now you're going to say, well, Les, come on, stop cutting around the bush and come down to brass tacks. What is it that you did? Okay? As a three-time candidate for mayor of Pittsburgh, you never heard of me up until now. As a three-time candidate for mayor of Pittsburgh, I went and spent $1,700 for a reverse osmosis system so that in my home, in my kitchen, with my lovely wife, I have 2 faucets, one for Pittsburgh water and one for reverse osmosis. In other words, I don't take a chance on making coffee. I may wash the dishes in Pittsburgh water, but when it comes to anything that I ingest as a person, looking at my 85 years of, thank God, health that I can be here this evening, I have to say to you, there is a solution, and it doesn't have to take 10 years. Why? Because it took a half an hour to put a $1,700 system that covers my wife, myself, for a period of 6 months with new cartridges that cost $250. So you can take that and start extrapolating what the mathematics is. And then I have to turn to this gentleman, and with all due respect, $1,700 and $250 is what? It's a couple of grand. Well, a couple of grand for 2,100 solutions so that we stop our children from ingesting chemicals that can harm their growth is not $44 million. The going figure that it was stated from this podium was somewhere between $5,000 to $20,000. $20,000 times 2,000, you do the math. There's something wrong here. What we're doing is we're being floored by the size of what we think the problem is. And instead of looking for old-fashioned, down-to-earth, put it on the table and find the best osmosis system that can be put into every one of those homes to stop it immediately. And I bet you we can get it done in 2 years, maybe even in 1 if you put enough people, because you're not digging. You can do the digging after the fact. You can have a good time and dig up the whole world. And as I said to Letitia, exchanging thoughts with Letitia before a recent board meeting, nobody made a statement in this room that we gave you pictures with replacement cartridges. Nobody remembered to remind mom and dad that the 6 months or whatever the time limit was has been used up, and that you're just drinking the poison in Pittsburgh water. Now, we want Amazon, we want growth, we want everything, and that's absolutely right. And what I want to see in my last days is a water system that is corrected. Go and spend as much as you want whenever you want, but stop poisoning our children and mothers now. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have James Johns from Mount Washington, please?
Hello, panel. James Johns from Mount Washington. I want to thank you for the hard work and the recommendations that you came up with. In particular, I like the idea of the no more free water for the heavy users, the big users. I think that those people that are using the water need to carry their part of the freight. And the second thing is I'm curious about the stormwater plan. Although I, like all of us, am concerned about the safe drinking water, my bigger concern is about storm and sanitary sewer. And I've been trying to engage with PWSA since March, and on my concerns on this, I got as far as an exchange of emails and somebody coming out from PWSA regarding a rain garden, and that was it. In Mount Washington, there are a series of combination lines that are 15-inch in diameter. They feed into another line that is 15 inches in diameter. Those lines fill up very rapidly when you get into a storm water situation of 1 inch of rain per hour. It can't handle it. That was built back 100 years ago when there were not all of the stormwater gutters and downspouts connected to the combination lines. It was more of a sanitary line. Now, up on Mount Washington, probably half of the land area is impervious surface. The water goes right in, it fills up the lines very quickly. And then once they're filled, then it flows over into people's yards, into people's basements. It's a tremendous problem. I've heard jokes made about the situation regarding kayaks, and people can kayak through some of that stuff. So the idea that PWSA is going to care about me and my neighbors, I have a hard time believing that. If I don't know where to go with some of the stuff if they aren't responding. I probably have 100 emails in, and I don't get anything back. There is no transparency coming back on what the capacity is of that line and what the plans are. And this is ongoing. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in damage when basements flood. So this is not, there is no quick fix, but there is also no feedback and no input that's coming back to us about what the plans are.
That's not the way it should be. Sorry, Fred.
I was just going to say that this committee has taken a strong position with the integration of a stormwater management process that looks at green infrastructure. We cited some activity that PWSA did support over the past several years, in particular some projects they supported in the east end of Pittsburgh. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Senator Furlow's project 15206, Little Negley Run.
No.
And it's an urban wetland that was created to mitigate CSO issues in the region. And the goal was to mitigate so many million gallons of water that never entered into the system. So I can say through firsthand experiences that my group and my team have worked with PWSA over the years. They've been responsive to looking at innovative ways to mitigate risks. But that's a project. What we need to look at is a systems response and not a project response. But projects demonstrate the viability of whether or not we should move forward into a systems response. I cannot speak to why you haven't heard back from anybody. This board will take that information back to our tables as well.
Mr. John, I
And
think
Bob
PWSA
is
Got the attention of
right
Mr. Weimer here.
So,
If I could, I'm going to give you my card, and I would appreciate an email from you tomorrow to give me your address.
I'll be glad to, and I'll be glad to share with you all of my efforts.
I would appreciate it. And
Okay.
I think the other thing the public should know is that our communication staff now is setting up meetings throughout the city. And we intend to, 1 or 2 times a week, meet with folks to understand the issues that they have and respond to questions such as yours. So please give us that opportunity.
I will do that. Thank you
Thank
for your card. Yeah, I think as you're making your recommendations, perhaps some kind of a standard of what would be a reasonable expectation from me to hear back. 24 hours, 48 hours, 1 week, 2 weeks, put a number on it.
we'll definitely take that under advisement, and we also will look at making some of these responses available on the website so that people can also look at a public source with regards to some of their questions as well.
Okay, I'm very much pro-development, but there comes a point in time where you already have a system that's taxed. You can't be keeping adding more onto it. There are multiple unit properties that are for sale up there that, you know, if you put in more roofs, that's that's more impervious surface, more water coming into the system. It needs to be addressed before more is put into the system.
I can also share with you as a commissioner that the city planning department is working on the implementation of some of the P4 standards about people, planet, place, and performance. And these measurements are being reviewed by city planning department to see how they can be instrumentally involved or infused into our decision-making process for new developments. So these things are also taking place at the same time.
What is your vision for the stormwater? Did you get into any specifics on how the stormwater?
So PWSA actually has a stormwater plan, which is 85, 90, 100% finished. The concept is that each residential unit would be assigned a charge for stormwater. And those additional developments that result in more impervious surfaces would be charged a higher amount of money. So you would match the stormwater fee to the creator of the stormwater, which creates the right incentives, right? So if you are the owner of a large impervious parking lot, right now, what do you pay in terms of stormwater? Conveyance. You don't pay anything at all. And you create more CSO stormwater runoff than a residential customer, but the residential customer right now bears all the costs associated with that. So the concept is matching the cost associated with stormwater overflow to the end user that is creating the stormwater overflow. So a large impervious surface area like, no offense, Dr. Cohen, CMU right now pays a disproportionate lower amount of money for their stormwater conveyance than residential customers, even though the residential customers don't carry the proportionate amount of the conveyance. So that's the concept. It is a heavy lift because there are lots of political forces that are weighed against putting that. But from our perspective, from the Blue Ribbon Panel's perspective, and I think from PWSA's perspective, and we do have an Alcosan board member here too. I hate to call her out, but she's in the audience. I think it's a more equitable way, and it, as I think Fred said, it creates the right incentives. And that is, if you're going to do a new development, include in it a stormwater management plan. And if, as part of your stormwater management plan, you figure out a way to capture the stormwater where it falls, as opposed to just putting it into the source system, then two things will happen. One, we don't have to build bigger pipes to carry that stormwater to Alcosan. Two, those pipes that aren't bigger, that when the stormwater hits it, backs up either in the road, flooding the road, or backs up into your basement, that will significantly mitigate those issues too. So we think the stormwater fee could be a very helpful component of dealing with our CSO, our stormwater overflow issues.
As an option to the fee, the idea of retaining water on site, and those projects, you can detain the water and trickle it out at a much slower pace. And right now, I don't think that's been put in to the extent that it could
Actually,
be.
there's a significant amount of demonstration projects, and the woman that's right there, Brenda, has been at the forefront of making that happen and doing exactly what you said, which is, as opposed to just putting it into the stormwater conveyance system, let's capture it at the source through rain gardens, through other type of green infrastructure projects.
The people at the start of the line, they're fine. It's the people downstream. And, please look at that as you're in, and then let us know how that, I'll talk to you and we'll figure. Okay.
And I would say, Mr. Johns, that this is not true across the board, but city planning has supported new development in which some new projects have put bioswales and cisterns in to capture water on site. It's not a standard practice, but we look heavily positively on those institutions that take those precautions to mitigate stormwater overflow.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to figure out how do we create a systems response versus a few conscious developers response. So that's something that we continue to push forward at the planning level.
I would recommend or point out Columbus, Ohio. I've done development projects over there, and they use parking facilities and below ground storage lines that are choked off, and they trickle out at no faster rate than what would be happening if rain was hitting the surface. So that's worked out pretty effectively, and it puts it on the development projects as they're coming through. So Pittsburgh, I don't think does much of that, but I think that's a good alternative too, and without hitting people with additional taxes for stormwater runoff. So on the big projects that are coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jess from DSA.
Hello, I want to thank
Can you state
everyone.
your name, please?
Oh, sorry, my name is Jessica Ansel, and I'm here with Pittsburgh DSA, but also as a concerned citizen. I want to thank you all for the chance to speak today. I do feel there has been some communication with the people of Pittsburgh over water issues over the last year. For example, I wrote a statement asking them to support the moratorium on water shutoffs over this winter and that was read at a meeting a few months ago and actually successfully passed through. Thank you for Ali Shaw, who read my statement at the meeting since I was at work. But I just want to say that I appreciate your committee sharing the view with us that you don't trust the electoral process to free Pittsburgh from corruption as we go over our water process. But I also question some of the things you say, and that's why it's important we have this process. For example, Mr. Thompson's statement that we need to remove voters from the process because politicians won't raise rates if they're in charge because they're afraid of voters. In 2013, the average monthly water bill for Pittsburgh was $40 a month. Now it's $70 a month, and it's predicted to go up to $100 a month by 2020. So rates are being raised, so you might want to reconsider that assumption. I do think that if we have the appoint process for the nominees as it is now with Mayor Peduto appointing them, Mayor Peduto has done a lot of great things for the city, but economic development is one of his priorities. I mean, he doesn't have affordable housing laws in the city like for Pittsburgh like other cities have of our size, and I don't have faith that his nominees will put the interests of working class people first. And what about, you know, people who deal with those problems, people who are evicted over bills that didn't make sense and suddenly there's $1,000 due because they haven't heard from PSWA for the past year? I've worked with those people. What about people who are now having to pay for expensive water filters in their own home because they don't trust the water, or they're waiting weeks and months to get the lead test results back, and then when they get the lead test results back, they don't even make any sense and they can't understand what it means. I feel like the public has gotten more and more involved with water issues over the past couple of years, and you can see through the Our Water campaign, through Pittsburgh United, through other groups that are setting up to do our own lead testing for residents. And it feels like now that this is coming to fruition, we're being shut out of the process as this new board of nominees is being created. So I am not here to demean you, right? I want to work with you and value this chance, but I would like to see something like quarterly meetings with this new committee, with the public, where people can continue to voice our concerns and try and hold them accountable. I would really like the chance to have more direct voter accountability or other ways to remove them from office if they're not meeting public concerns. And I would also like to ask that maybe we consider in the long term creating a Pittsburgh Department of Water like there was before PWSA was created, because PWSA has never really done a good job of taking care of the water needs of the city and public health. And maybe something more long-term where people who are qualified professionals can apply to work at this organization and manage water strategy and costs over the long term would be better than having this untouchable, self-perpetuating board of nominees that is not very open to the public who may want to work on water issues ourselves. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I guess I have one more question for you all, which is that as it currently stands, you know, what do you recommend for people who want to bring concerns to this new committee as it's created, and what is the process for us? Because we know how to influence elected officials, but I don't know how to influence this board of nominees.
I think that, you know, a way to kick that discussion off is that, you know, creating trust is clearly, you know, what came through all the community engagements, and that was the number one priority. We're going to get a special counsel that's going to address, you know, contractually, how do you build in those considerations to the process? You know, I'm a process guy, and, you know, one of the things that was lacking, I think, in the broader context was there weren't any clear processes. There weren't any processes that touch the community. There was no requirement that there needs to be a public meeting once a quarter, or here's how we're going to capture information or data. Everything was ad hoc. You know, problems were ad hoc, responses were ad hoc. There wasn't any process. So take the people out of it, you know, for the moment, and who's governing it or who's not governing it. We need to have contractually established processes in place that can ensure we have the best quality water. And we need to trust that we have the right people that have the right expertise to be able to provide that. And I think, you know, what you're suggesting is something can be incorporated into the contractual elements of how we establish this. And so that's we could proceed with that kind of, you know, information and incorporate it in a go forward way. I think it's a good suggestion.
I think to piggyback on that statement, I think that we are seeking to get more feedback from you guys as we craft a response for the RFQ or RFP at this point. And so this feedback you're giving us could, as Mark alluded to, can really be infused into the contract conversation that we want to negotiate. And so that's why we're saying solutions are better at this point than just being angry and upset. I mean, we're all angry and upset. I can't speak for you, but I just had a 2-year-old daughter that tested at a high level for lead. And so I'm not sitting up here as somebody who's not impacted by this situation. I'm told my new job and my board I would not get off of this board. I have a personal invested interest in resolving this issue. And so out of 6 kids, this is the only one that has lead poisoning. And so I'm just like you. I'm sitting in this seat. I want it fixed. But being on this panel, what I've discerned is that this is not an overnight resolution. It's very complex. It got here because there was a lot of people who took their hands off the wheel. We're just simply trying to come up with a governance process that puts people's hands back on the wheel. And how do we make sure the community's voices is not just heard, but their recommendations are implemented into the resolution. And so we hear you. I just want to state that clearly to everybody. We clearly hear you, and we will take that under advisement.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes all the people who signed up to speak. If there's anybody who wishes to say a word, please line up and state your name.
Hello, my name is Gabriel McMorland, and today I'm here representing the Thomas Merton Center, and we're also part of the Our Water campaign. And I'm trying to erase the things I was going to say that everyone else already said, so sorry if I repeat something. First, it was really reassuring to see the report and the recommendations they all came out with. And I really do believe you when you said you went back and forth on the difficult question of governance. So I just want to reiterate the spirit of what Allie Shaw put out there, which is that we do think that collectively, the public and you as facilitators of this public conversation, that we can all come up with better solutions for governance than were put out in the report. And I know there's a fundamental tension between, in every system, right? There's a tension between wanting to prevent short-term thinking that can come from the electoral cycle, 2 years, 4 years, what have you. There's a balance between trying to think long-term and protect things from political influence, and also wanting to make sure they're accountable to voters, to residents, to ratepayers, to water drinkers. And so that's why we think that there really can be solutions that we can arrive at together. We put out some today. I'm sure there's some that you all discussed that didn't make it into the report. But I think we can come up with something better than the Board of Nominators and the self-perpetuating system. And one concern with that is I'm going to give a caveat here in the beginning of this, actually. This is not about anyone's character, and there could be a person who's a perfect, the most upstanding, honest, virtuous, altruistic person, someone that would be a great sibling, father, brother, mother, partner. But if they're representing the interests of business or of a lot of the large nonprofit institutions and employers in this city, then unfortunately for them, often their official role, unelected, but their official role will be at odds with the interests of low-income residents, labor, and other vulnerable populations. So when we're thinking about that, those are the kinds of people, those are the kinds of community leaders who often end up on commissions, on panels, on self-perpetuating boards. And they're not insulated from politics, and often the positions they're already in could end up at odds with some of the concerns around the needs of workers or of low-income ratepayers. And I recognize that's a tension that y'all are already struggling with, so I'm just saying that I hope we can keep that conversation going, not close the book on it, and come up with solutions together around that. And in the spirit of that, I have a question. I wanted to know some of your, if you all have more thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. But I have also a question, which is, I feel like this must be a thing you all already talked about, and so that's why I'm very curious what thoughts you all already arrived at. What can we do now, whether it's through governance or other kinds of policy changes, what can we do now to protect the system long-term from privatization and from public-private partnerships that place for-profit companies directly in control of major parts of the system? So I'd love to hear some answers to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is something we talked about. It is something that we felt very strongly about, that this remain a public asset. And the strongest way we can prevent it from sliding out of the public asset domain is to get it well run. If it's well run, then those groups that are interested in privatizing it won't have an argument for privatization because it's well run as a public utility. So that, I think, is something that we absolutely all talked about, and that's why when we focused on our recommendations, we focused on things that can improve the operations of PWSA, both in terms of the short term as well as the governance level.
Thank you. I would ask that the rest of the speakers keep their responses at 2 minutes or less, please. Please state your name again.
My name is Crystal Knight. I'm also with the Thomas Merton Center and work with the Our Water campaign. And I just want to emphasize everything that Allie has said and what we helped bring to you to the table as far as our ideas of governance. And again, emphasize that we're concerned with the Board of Nominating idea. And again, laud the idea, pushing to keep our water public. But in your report, you discussed making sure that the board is diverse, and you mentioned having a diverse background in legal and finance, and in public health. I think that might be one of ours actually. But what are you doing to ensure that diversity also includes someone who understands low-income residents or people on public assistance or on fixed incomes? What are you doing to make sure that there's someone on the board that's going to have that aspect in mind? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody want to respond to that, or I can respond to that?
Point's been made. Yeah, we got it.
Okay. Next person. Well, Bob, Jerry, you mind if I just comment to that, or?
No, not at all.
So, I just wanted to state that our process for even looking at some of the nominations, we're also looking at extrapolating from existing nonprofits in the region that have concerns around these issues and tapping them as well. And so we're looking at not just experts in the field who can make PWSA run more efficiently, but also ensuring that we at least talk to institutions that have a great concern for the public's best interests and also look at them as viable candidates as well.
Hi, my name is Jay Walker. I live in Shadyside. I'm a transit advocate, and I'm not here with any group. I'd like to ask you guys to please don't remove the rest of the PWSA residency requirement. Having PWSA employees be a part of the Pittsburgh community, they serve as a multiplier effect on our city. People have been leaving the city for years to chase a percentage point difference in taxes or due to racially tinged public school fears. This recommendation won't help. PWSA jobs help keep the city livable for a lot more people. I don't believe that we lack enough qualified candidates within the city limits. Let's search harder. I'd also like to say that I really appreciated the report. It was very readable for someone who's not, a professional in this field. And I really am thankful that you guys recommend that we keep the asset public and publicly managed.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Troring. I'm a resident of Greenfield and also a member of Our Water Campaign. I'll keep my comment very brief. The topic of a stormwater fee has come up a few times this evening, and I just want to reiterate that Our Water Campaign very strongly supports a stormwater fee as a way to keep the rate structure more equitable while bringing in much needed revenue for some really significant infrastructure repairs. So I will just close by saying, what will you do to do your part to ensure that a stormwater fee is something that we see in the near future? Thank you.
Could I ask you a question? Have you guys thought through how you'd structure the fee, sort of fee schedules or the details of it?
I'm not exactly prepared to speak to that. I'm not sure what was in the...
Didn't PWSA have an entire... they worked with consultants for...
No,
Yeah.
Got it. I'm just wondering, so they've shown a lot of interest in this, and if you had your own thoughts about how to structure a fee, I'd be interested.
I mean, yeah, because I think our stance is that certain, individual residents shouldn't be bearing the burden for runoff that they're not contributing to, right? So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Claudia Kirkpatrick, and I'm here as a representative of the Sierra Club, the local group of the organization. One of the things that we have been concerned with and working on has been the citywide green plan. And I'm particularly involved with the 4 Mile Run project. And so I wanted to ask how the set of proposals might work with the citywide green plan.
Great question. I think that we understand that PWSA has a green plan. We understand that various communities in the city have green plan and infrastructure plans. We understand the city has adopted several initiatives, and PWSA has supported piloted projects in various parts of the city to kind of show at the community level how they plan on dealing with stormwater overflow issues. So I think there's been a myriad of projects that have been undertaken to kind of discern what is the best and prudent way to move forward. In addition to, is there a catchment process that can be implemented at a community level that mitigates that water going into the system in the first place? So I think these are all things that have been thought about, but each of those thoughts require additional resources to test the validity of. And so I think what we're just trying to figure out is, given the various interests in the region, who's actually demonstrating the best practices. And so when we look at the city's adoption of their green infrastructure plan, PWSA's green infrastructure plan, when you look at the Hills plan, how do you merge all of those into a comprehensive plan? And so when we talk about this issue, that's a whole nother segment that undergirds a possible solution that could cut costs, be community-based, reduce issues in those communities that all have to be vetted through some process that also looks at the integration of those ideas into the existing system. So in a short way or long way, it's a complex problem, but I don't think there's a lack of effort in looking at diversifying the responses, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name's Jill Nolan Harris. I'm from Mount Washington, but I also work for Councilwoman Teresa Gale-Smith. But I'm talking now as a resident of living here in Pittsburgh. I stand on the front line when our residents have problems. They're calling us. They're asking us when they can't get an answer from PWSA, or they don't like the answer because they don't want to make payment arrangements. There are working poor in these type of things. So I find government really important. I'm also a daughter. My father's 92 years old, retired from the city, worked for DPW when there wasn't PWSA. He primarily did water lines and worked with the water company. Talking to him, he joined in 1948, he retired in 1974. Believe it or not, we were voted the best water in the United States. We had the best Alcosan. When they went into the east and they started changing the lead lines, they were surprised how many had already been done. What was funny is prior to doing that, my father said we were doing that back in the 50s and 60s. We were already starting. So government does do good things, and they can do do good things. And I think if we work together and we kind of solve, because when we don't talk about the history, when we lost our mills, when we went bankrupt, and the state got involved, this is when all this fell apart. So we have to find a harmony here. I do know that my councilwoman, who is my district, I pick up the phone and I need help. She's always been there. And I think anybody that knows, most of our, 99%, all our council people are like this, and all of us that work for the staff. Because we are accountable. I'm accountable for my job. And I think we need to step back for a minute and look at this. And I think we also have to go back into the history of when it was the water company and how they did their job so well. And maybe we need to kind of tweak it, because this is obviously 2018, but I think we're losing something here. And as I hear people speak, I realize that. So I had to give my opinion. And I can honestly say council works real hard, and we try our best, and we try to work, and we have worked very well with PWSA and many issues. But when people are desperate, they're not going to call a board member. They won't. I have a problem. I'm not calling a board member. I can't get to them. And maybe your first generation of boards will be available. But what happens when we're in the third, the fourth, the fifth generation? And at this point, it's just, I'm not dealing with them. But a public official, yeah, we have to deal with it.
Well, you know, I can guarantee you that under any governance arrangement, constituents who are unhappy with PWSA will still call you. And I'm guessing that PWSA under any governance arrangement would be equally responsive or not responsive. I'll let you judge whether you've got city council members on the board or not.
But our city council gets voted in, and when people aren't happy, they vote them out.
Right.
And that's key.
How do you think
And
that's
when
gonna...
this board that's an upper level, there is no, they don't have a choice, or do they have a vote? And I'm not happy with a board member because he does ignore all the calls and he doesn't pay attention to his area. What do we do as people to get him off that board?
What have we done now?
You know?
What have we done up to now?
I think what's going on up to now is the problem is somewhere because of this law system. But I don't think we should go from one extreme to the other either. That's why I'm saying we have to find a accountable middle where our people and our residents feel like they have a say and they have someone that is accountable.
I think we've gotten a lot of good ideas tonight for how to tweak the governance arrangement we're proposing in a way that gives the public more access or reassures them that they do.
And that's all I'm asking for.
But the idea that because we have city council members on the board, or
I'm not even saying
they're-
that. I'm not even saying that on the board. I'm just saying as city council, when these people, Teresa's not on the board.
I know.
But these constituents call.
And they still will, I promise you.
They do, but there's a responsibility there also. They're accountable.
I get it.
That's all I'm saying. And then I think we need to look at that, because that's what you're hearing from everyone. They want someone who's going to be accountable, that they have a little say to. That's all.
Thank you very much.
You know, it's interesting when we looked at the governance, and just so people understand my perspective, I was chair of the Pittsburgh Water and Sewerage Authority Board for 3 years, and I met with all council people, including your councilwoman, and talked to them on a regular basis. I don't think the political influence on my tenure on the board was bad either from the council people or from the mayor, Mayor Peduto. The problem is durability. And that's the challenge. The fixes that we have to make have to be consistent and have to exist over a long period of time. And so I think and so when the mayor changes, by the way, the reason PWSA is challenged right now was because when it was spun off, talking about history, when it was spun off from the city water department, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, it was done for one reason and one reason only, because the city needed money. And so the city spun it off into an independent authority and then loaded it up with debt. And that was a short-term fix that the administration at the city council at that time did to inject a bunch of money into the city pension fund, which then eventually was lost because it was placed in risky investments. And so what we're trying to do, the solution, and I agree with Dr. Cohen, we've got some good suggestions. The one that I heard, which is, the removal of the board of nominators with a supermajority vote, of city council, which, keeps some accountability there. But what we're trying to do is create a structure that doesn't allow knee-jerk reactions, that puts the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority in a bad position. And when Bob Weimer and Deb Lestitian and the other folks over there that are doing good work, that we can give them a mechanism that allows them to stay consistent and to complete that work, to replace, the lead service lines, even though it's quite expensive, that type of stuff. So I agree with you. We can make some tweaks to make sure that it doesn't become, as I said earlier, a star chamber where basically it's a self-perpetuating group of folks that are sitting in a back room figuring out how they're gonna deal with issues. But I think we also have to be cognizant of the fact that the reason we're in this position right now, the primary reason, and this is the recommendation that came from our report, is because politicians, maybe not with bad intentions, but in a crisis, made bad decisions affecting the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority for multiple years. It wasn't just one administration or one set of people. So.
My name is Laurie Davidson. I'm a longtime Squirrel Hill resident. I raised a daughter there. I've been very concerned about our water for decades, not just with this recent crisis. And all of my charitable money goes to organizations that Allie is in charge of. If there's one person in this entire room that I would choose to appoint a board, it would be her. No offense, not you guys. And I can think of several other people that are very involved in the water for very long term that I wish that you guys would consult with. Doug Shields, for example, Jim Furlow you mentioned, Deb Gross, all these people I have tremendous trust in to make those sorts of decisions. I have concerns also, as many people have talked about, but my concern is whoever does the nominating is still ultimately in control politically of whoever this board is. So that is so now you're nominating someone else to nominate someone else. Like it just perpetuates another level of administrative cumbersomeness, and I'm not sure how much it actually removes the politics. So unless I'm misunderstanding that, that's one of my main concerns. I guess I wanted to start by saying you all genuinely seem interested in our input here, and I greatly appreciate that. Kudos to doing everything that we can to keep this a public utility or get it back as a fully public utility. Water will, without a doubt, be our most valuable asset in the future. And I think we really need to keep that in mind. I think others have mentioned that also. The stormwater incentives sound great. I was really thrilled to hear about that tonight, but why only new developments? Why not existing ones? I don't see why they shouldn't be held accountable at all. Also, I'm Canadian, just as a bit of a background, grew up there, and the way they handle their garbage removal is really interesting to me. There's incentives on everyone to be accountable. You pay less for all kinds of things at various levels the more responsible your behavior is. And, right now, 2 of my storm drains still go into the runoff system because I haven't been able to come up with a solution. I should be paying more right now for that. I think that should be a system that goes and make everyone responsible for the environment that they're creating and the burden on the system. On top of that, though, UPMC. I mean, we've talked about CMU, and I have a heck of a lot less of a problem with CMU, who are generally very green. I do not understand why UPMC is not kicking in more. They have profited, even though they're nonprofit, immensely from me supporting them as a city resident. And I don't understand why they're helping to fund children to go to college, but not all of us have children. They're going to be going to college. Why aren't they a health system helping to resolve this problem at a financial level and in any way that they can? And if to whatever extent I'm supporting their water, I'm tired of that. Like, I'm already supporting their garbage and everything else. I'm not allowed to use UPMC. I have to drive all the way out to the suburbs to go to a doctor, thanks to the craziness that's going on. So the least they could do is kick in to help solve my water problem. So I would appreciate if those sort of things are investigated. Obviously, I'm a little angry about that, but you could balance that out.
Just a little.
And the last thing I have to say is about fracking. I am so grateful that the city has kept it out of the city so far. However, water has a way of running downhill and downstream and out of counties. And there is no filter that can get rid of fracking waste. I've investigated that thoroughly. Reverse osmosis does not solve that problem. The only thing that's going to keep fracking waste out of our water supply is keeping it out in the first place. So to whatever extent you guys can have any influence over that, please. I can't think of a more important or critical issue than that one when it comes to our water. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. My name's Tom Hoffman. I'm a conservation programs coordinator with the Sierra Club. Who knows where they come up with these titles? I said a couple of really quick things. I really wanted to thank the Blue Ribbon panel for all their hard work. We love the fact that you're doing the public route. And I really want to thank the openness of the panel. I think it's been really great that you've did this thing tonight, and we've been able to talk to you, so we really support that. Sierra Club was a founding member of both Our Water and Clean Rivers, so we support their position. We also support the good work that's been going on at PWSA now in the last couple of months. We really think it's really important that get a chance to keep going. On the stormwater utility issue, there's been a lot of studies done around that we can get to you. I think there was some Pitt students from the CAT school that did a whole study a couple of years ago about stormwater utility, how you can implement it region-wide and all that. So if you're interested in that, we can get that to you, because I really think that's important. And the last one was, I noticed on here you had a comment about Alcosan should be responsible for collecting its own money, and I guess I'd just like to hear a little bit more about that, because I think, well, that's a good idea. So
Alex is the historian on this issue.
So when Alcosan was formed, to treat our sewage and stormwater on a centralized basis, they were a young organization, and so all the municipalities that are in the Alcosan service area entered into an agreement called the Z Agreement. I don't know if you know what the date of the agreement was, Brenda, but it was 40 years ago. And
there was A, B, C, and D all the way down to Z, right?
Yeah. And so, in order to make Alcosan successful, all the municipalities did two things. They agreed that they would send out bills and collect for Alcosan, and two, they agreed that they would pay Alcosan 100% of Alcosan's charges. So if PWSA sends out a bill for Alcosan and only collects $90, they still pay Alcosan $100. So the recommendation that was in the report was that, Alcosan could be argued is a stronger organization financially right now than PWSA is. And so that shifting of risk associated with collections to PWSA, as well as the other regional water authorities, doesn't make as much sense as it did when it was originally placed into effect. And therefore, our suggestion was if Alcosan billed for its charges and was required to collect it, it would make it much more like PWSA, which is it would be customer facing. So when you get a charge now, and everybody in this room is probably well aware of their PWSA bill, right? But there are a lot of people that don't realize that there are two parts to your PWSA bill, right? There's the part for water. Actually, there's three parts, right? There's the part for water, there's the part for your sewer conveyance, and then there's the part for your sewage stormwater treatment. And so the thought was making Alcosan more customer fronting would be a healthy thing for Alcosan, and the financial impact to PWSA is. By the way, PWSA he's hiding the CFO's here too. He's on the very end there. So I'm kind of looking at him, but it's a couple $1 million a year in the failure to collect those Alcosan charges that PWSA has to pay, and that's a couple $1 million a year that PWSA could spend on other things. So that's a concept. Obviously, I'm going to use this term that was coined by Dr. Cohen. We call them the 7 deadly sins. The stormwater fee, the free water, that type of stuff. All of those are very, very political footballs, right? There are a lot of constituencies that don't want those to change, from the Pennsylvania American Water Subsidy to the free water to the Alcosan charges. But we believe that those are the type of things that we should be shifted to allow PWSA to focus on its primary missions. Hopefully that was a good explanation.
Thank you very much. At this particular time, I would like to thank the public for their patience, their voice, as well as this Blue Ribbon panel for their patience and our ability to receive your concerns. At this particular time, we're going to bring this process to an end. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Have a wonderful and blessed evening.